The Mediterranean Sea. In the late afternoon of August 1st, 1798 appeared calm, but beneath the surface was a suffocating tension. Off the coast of Aboukir Bay, the French fleet lay motionless, massive hulls forming a curved line close to shore. They believed they had chosen the perfect position, one no enemy could break through. Yet within that certainty, a dangerous question began to form. What if the enemy did not attack the way they expected? On the horizon, the masts of the British fleet slowly emerged in the fading light. Horatio Nelson did not slow down and did not wait. He understood that time would decide everything. While there was still enough light to clearly see the enemy's position, it was time to strike. If they waited until morning, the element of surprise would be gone. The French fleet under Brueys was anchored in place, bows facing the open sea and sterns toward the shore. Their guns were positioned mainly to repel an attack from the outside. Between the lead ship and the shallow waters, they believed no vessel would dare to pass. It was a gap they ignored, a space they trusted nature itself to guard. Nelson saw that gap and made his decision instantly. Part of his fleet would attack from the outside, exactly as the French expected, but the rest would slip inside, passing through waters no one could confirm were safe. It was a gamble where any mistake meant running aground and being destroyed. At around 6 in the evening, HMS Goliath led the way straight into the gap. The ship glided over the shallow water in tense silence, moving meter by meter as if testing the limits. When it suddenly appeared on the inner side of the French line, every defensive assumption collapsed. There were no guns ready to face that direction. The first broadside thundered at close range, tearing into the French hull. Immediately after, more British ships followed, one after another forcing their way into the narrow space. The French line was trapped between two streams of fire, from the outside and the inside at the same time. There was no position that was truly safe. French sailors rushed to turn their guns and cut anchor lines to shift position. But as the light faded, everything descended into confusion. Some ships turned too slowly while others had no room to maneuver. Cannons that had faced the open sea now had to be dragged and turned in haste. On the outer side, Nelson led the remaining ships straight into close combat. They anchored beside their targets, holding extremely short distances to maximize firepower. Each volley carried devastating force. The French ships became fixed targets, unable to maneuver and unable to escape. Gun smoke began to cover the entire battlefield. Flashes of fire burst continuously as darkness fell. The sound of splintering wood, clashing metal, and shouted orders filled the sea. Each ship became its own battle, yet all were caught in the same storm. At the center of the line, the flagship L'Orient became the focal point. British ships concentrated their fire on it, unleashing relentless broadsides. Admiral Brueys was severely wounded, but refused to leave his post. He ordered his fleet to hold, but the formation no longer existed as it once had. Night fully covered Aboukir Bay, yet the firelight made the sea never truly dark. The two fleets were now locked together in a fight with no escape, and within that chaos, the balance was slowly shifting toward the ships that had dared to go where no one believed they could. Darkness now completely engulfed the bay, but the battle did not slow. It grew even more violent. Flashes from cannon fire tore through the night, revealing ships trapped at deadly close range. Distances that were already tight became even tighter as British ships pressed in and held their positions. At the front of the French line, ships were being crushed one by one. Fire from both sides prevented any coordinated response. Guns had to keep changing direction, slowing their rate of fire. Meanwhile, the British maintained steady pressure, aiming carefully at exposed weaknesses. French ships began losing control. Some broke their anchor lines and drifted sideways under fire, accidentally blocking or interfering with others. A few fought back fiercely, but being trapped left them only able to resist, not recover. The sea filled with broken wood, shattered masts, and bodies drifting in the water. At the center, Lorient was still under heavy fire from multiple directions. Its guns kept firing, but each shot revealed new vulnerabilities. Fires began to break out after repeated hits. At first they were small, but with dry wood and gunpowder, they spread faster than expected. The crew of Lorient tried to fight the flames while continuing the battle. Buckets of water passed from hand to hand in flickering light. But British fire did not ease, and more shots tore into the hull. The flames began spreading deeper into the ship. Bruys, though gravely wounded, refused to leave the deck. He ordered his men to hold and continue firing. But as the fire approached the powder magazine, the danger became undeniable. If the flames reached it, the ship would cease to exist. Around 10 at night, Lorient was engulfed in flames. The fire rose high, lighting the battlefield in a red glow. Both sides understood what was about to happen. Gunfire around the ship slowed as nearby vessels pulled back slightly to avoid the blast. For a brief moment, an eerie silence spread across the battle. All eyes turned toward Lorient as flames consumed it piece by piece. Survivors leapt into the sea, trying to escape in desperation. Then the explosion came. A massive flash tore through the night, followed by a deafening blast across the bay. Lorient was ripped apart, fire and smoke rising into the sky. The shock wave rolled outward, shaking nearby ships. Debris fell like rain, carrying burning fragments and bodies. After the explosion, darkness returned, but not the same as before. The French center was completely destroyed. A gap opened, and the morale of the remaining ships began to falter. Ships that had fought fiercely now faced an irreversible reality. The British fleet moved quickly to exploit the moment. They tightened the encirclement and continued attacking the remaining ships. Without coordination, each French vessel was isolated and overwhelmed one by one. Some were forced to surrender after losing nearly all ability to fight. At the far end of the line, a few French ships tried to keep distance and return fire. They cut their anchors and attempted to escape into open sea. But in the darkness and confusion, maneuvering was extremely difficult. Every delayed decision came at a heavy cost. The night dragged on with scattered but intense fighting. There was no longer a clear line, only clusters of ships locked in close combat. Each fight was separate, but the outcome was becoming the same. The French fleet was being worn down piece by piece. As the gunfire gradually faded, parts of the sea still burned. Damaged ships drifted, some still smoldering. Cries for help echoed in the darkness, mixed with the sound of water against broken hulls. The battle was not fully over, but its outcome was nearly decided. At first light, Aboukir Bay revealed a completely different scene. The sea was covered with wreckage, broken masts, burned hulls, and drifting bodies. The surviving ships were heavily scarred. smoke still rising from multiple points. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and charred wood. The French fleet was no longer a unified force. The front line had been almost entirely destroyed overnight. At the center, where Lorient once stood, there was only empty water and debris. That collapse had severed all connection between the remaining ships. Some ships at the rear could still fight, but they were completely isolated. There was no clear command and no formation left to rely on. Each ship acted on its own while the British reorganized and prepared for the final assault. The distance between them closed quickly. British ships approached their targets one by one. They did not spread out their attacks, but focused on each ship individually. Closing in, they anchored and fired at close range, repeating the same tactic that had shattered the front line. Each French ship was placed in a position it could not hold for long. Some resisted until the very end, firing back in desperation. But their fire lacked coordination and no longer carried the same strength. Guns fell silent as crews were wounded or exhausted. Once hull damage became too severe, surrender was the only option left. At the outer edge, a few French ships found space to escape into open waters. They used the remaining confusion to break away, but their numbers were small, and they could not return to save those still trapped. Their escape did not change the outcome. On British ships, sailors began taking in prisoners from surrendered vessels. Survivors were pulled from the water, many exhausted and badly wounded. Yet even then, guns continued firing where resistance remained. The battle only truly ended when no ship could fight back. By mid-morning, the guns fell silent. The French fleet was almost completely destroyed. Most ships had been captured or sunk, with only a few escaping. The British fleet, though damaged, remained largely intact and in full control of the battlefield. The silence after the battle was heavy. British ships drifted slowly among the wreckage, assessing damage and searching for survivors. There were no more commands and no more cannon fire, only the aftermath of a relentless night. Aboukir Bay had become a floating graveyard. This victory went beyond the destruction of a fleet. It cut off French forces in Egypt from any support by sea. Ships that once carried ambition across the region were gone in a single night. From that moment, control of the Mediterranean shifted firmly to Britain. The battle ended, but its consequences spread far beyond the water. With no supply lines and no naval support, French forces on land were left isolated. And it all began with the decision to sail into waters the enemy believed could never be crossed.